This is Polyamory Weekly, episode 587 for March 15th, 2020. Coming up on today's show, poly in the time of coronavirus. That's coming up on today's show. Hello everyone, I'm your host Minx, and this is an adult show about really lascivious things like honesty and communication about sex and relationships. If you're under 18, please stop listening and visit scarletteen.com. You may note that I am down one co-host today. Don't worry, never fear, lustyguy is okay. It's just that, well, we wanted to give Elle a little time to participate in her new hobby, painting, and we have a new puppy in the house. And so someone has to be in charge of the puppy while Mama Minx is behind the microphone. So if you hear some galumphing or some squeaks, nope, that's not me and that's not Elle having squeaky sex. That would be the dog chewing on a squeaky toy. And yes, we're all here in Seattle. We're all here in social isolation, although not full lockdown quarantine yet. I personally am working from home and going out very minimally. I'm going out for walks and bike rides, and every couple of days or so, I will walk to the closest coffee shop, which is a drive-through. And so the walk-in portion, I'm usually the only person there, so easy to stay 6 feet away. That's pretty much the extent of my exposure. But I gotta say, I've been seeing a lot of articles about animal shelters encouraging people to foster and adopt when they're in self-quarantine or social isolation. And I gotta say, life would have been a lot more boring without a rambunctious puppy to keep away from the cat. So, if you are solo poly or otherwise finding that there's a little bit more isolation than you're used to, highly recommend fostering a pet, as long as you can get things like pet food and pet supplies delivered without endangering yourself too much. In other announcements, I ran across another poly podcast. It's called Pod Cvlt Cast, and the cult is spelled with a V instead of a U. They have 34 episodes, and they're really long. They're like 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 episodes long, and they talk about things like poly movies and poly books, a little bit more like poly pop culture to a much deeper extent than we do. So I'll provide a link to that in the show notes at polyweekly.com or in the show notes section of your favorite podcast app. Well, since we haven't published an episode for over a month, there is tons of poly in the news. There is no way I'm going to cover all of it, but there were a couple things I wanted to bring up, along with Alan's latest Poly in the News Roundup, which does contain quite a bit of coverage about being poly in the time of the coronavirus. But the first article I wanted to talk about was Elisabeth Sheff, our favorite poly psychologist, has done a 4-part episode on being monogamous by orientation. That's right, she did 4 blog posts in Psychology Today. First was on how consensual non-monogamy is not a good choice as a method to fix a relationship that is broken. Second post is 4 tips for heteroflexible couples who are considering opening their relationships. The third one gives 3 reasons why consensual non-monogamy will not work for people who are, in fact, monogamous. And this last one is about monogamous by orientation, and to explain and explore how people just are monogamous by nature, some of them, both sexually and as a relationship orientation. It's a great series and much needed in the world. And a few days ago, Alan from the Poly in the News blog did a fantabulous, extremely long Friday Poly News Roundup. A lot of it is doing coronavirus coverage with a poly angle. But there's also, if you scroll down to the end, his regular coverage of TV and movies that are dealing with polyamory, either well or poorly. First up, there are some comics that are addressing the issue of being poly while dealing with this coronavirus pandemic. There's a couple of comics from ELS Comics, as well as one of our favorites, Kimchi Cuddles, that covers the point of thinking of it not as social isolation, but insulation, that we are all working together to create safety for each other. I think it was Mario Cuomo who said something about this is an act of love, and that's absolutely true. All these steps we have to take, hand washing, staying home from work, working from home, all the social isolation, as difficult as it can be, this is an act of love. This is something we are due to flatten that curve and keep ourselves and our loved ones as safe as possible. Other interesting articles he covers, how coronavirus is impacting polyamorous relationships. Not that great of an article, but it does talk about what to do when you live with multiple partners. Nothing new, general safety. Wash your hands, don't touch your face, limit non-essential travel, self-isolate within your home if you need to. As a side note, I have several friends whose partners are first responders, nurses, doctors, firefolk, and they are literally doing things like moving to the garage or moving to another location because they have a high risk of exposure and they don't want to expose their loved ones. Really tough on the loved ones, really tough. But again, to me, that's an act of fucking love. That means you love someone. There's another piece on Business Insider from Australia called How a Polyamorous Relationship Expert is Dating During the Coronavirus and What She Advises Non-Monogamous Clients. Now see, this has come up. People are asking like, Tinder, Grindr, should we be shutting down the dating apps? Should people even be dating at this point? I mean, my personal answer to this is hell no. Have you seen the numbers? You should not be going out and interacting, well, basically with anybody if you can possibly help it. But certainly not with people you don't know. But that being said, I think it's a great idea to do what they suggest in the article, which is talk to your partners about what they need during the pandemic. You probably already know, especially if you live with someone, but it's a good idea to talk, especially as news and information are changing every day. And we'll talk about this more again later, but my God, we have technology. Imagine if something like this had happened in the late 80s or the early 90s before we had internet and free video conferencing for everybody. I don't know about you, but I have already been to 2 virtual dance parties and had a fantastic time. I've been to 2 virtual cocktail hours and had a fantastic time. It was a great opportunity to have conversation with my friends, see their faces, sip some wine, and just interact in a way similar to what we might have in real life. But I've got to say, for me, it was actually better because in real life, there are things that are challenging for me in my body. Things like standing up when you're chatting at a party. I'm not good at standing for a long period of time, even when it's not on concrete, which is just murder on my knees and ankles. Yes, I'm old. Being able to chat with people when I was comfortable in my home and I didn't have to worry about how to get there or how to get back. Now, I know this will get old after a while, but active love, and there are ways to stay connected. And by the way, the tools that I recommend for this are, a lot of people are using Zoom. It's free to download and really easy. I also have been using Amazon Chime, which I was using for meetings and whatnot anyway. And it basically works kind of like Skype. You can text chat back and forth, or you can set up video conferencing meetings. So think about the kind of advice that we've given on episodes about things like long distance relationships. See if you can watch a show together instead of a dinner date. Maybe send dinner to their house and FaceTime them or Chime them or Zoom them. And just do things that you would normally do together, but try to find a virtual way to do it. Next article in Alan's Poly the News Roundup was an interesting article from the New York magazine's The Cut called What It's Like to Isolate with Your Girlfriend and Her Other Boyfriend. This came out just a few days ago. The most relevant part, I thought, was when they were asked, what has been the biggest adjustment for you with this situation? And the person responded, trying to be as self-aware as possible. There's a part of me that's relieved that Megan has another person here because then I don't have to be everything to her. I don't have to give her all the attention that's needed. I don't have to give her all the cuddles that are needed because she has another partner. In general, that's a really cool thing about polyamory. I love this idea of being self-aware. If you are cooped up with people that you're normally not cooped up with, or maybe just not normally cooped up with for as long as you are now, self-awareness is key. And to this, I would add regular check-ins too. Just checking in every couple of days to see how you're feeling. Are you on edge? Is there something I could do? What do you need right now? There's another article about, is it irresponsible to date around during a pandemic? I would say quibble and say it depends on what you mean by date around, but certainly putting all the aforementioned safety requirements in place to keep you and your partner safe would be wise. And especially if you have partners that are immunocompromised like me, you might even want to go a step or two further and maybe stop dating or maybe just limit it to virtual dating for the duration. And I would definitely say, let's hold off on the orgies and swing parties just for a little bit. If you have questions, comments, or feedback, you can call 802-505-POLY. Hey, you stuck at home, you bored? Give us a call. Tell us what's working well for you. Tell us what you've learned from this, or share a question that you think we or the audience might be able to help you out with. You can also email polyweekly@gmail.com and attach an MP3 file with your comments, suggestions, happy poly moments, or questions. And of course, if you want to book us or anything that involves a calendar, and yes, we do remote work as well, you can email lustyguy@polyweekly.com. Our topic today, love in the time of coronavirus. Of course, we already copied that a little bit in the Poly in the News section. But I have to throw in that I was just Facebook messaging with a former colleague who lives in a lockdown country in Europe, and she was asking about the idea of moving her metamour of just 1 year in with her husband and kids. And it's not something she would normally consider, I think. Normally we'd probably wait a long time, but she really didn't like the idea of not being able to see her partner for such a long time. And I have to say, I certainly understand that. There was a point last year when lustyguy was out for a month completing some scuba training, and it was hard on all of us. I tried to take joy in the things that I could. Sometimes it's nice not to have a partner around, have a little bit of girl time in the house, but it can be really hard. So I certainly understand the question and the inclination to do that. So I'm assuming she's not the only one who might be thinking about changing to a group living situation a little sooner than might otherwise consider. So this is what I was thinking might be handy. So first thing, you should definitely ask your current partner if there are any residual issues or concerns that haven't been brought up or fully addressed. If you have tensions with your current spouse or partner or kids or anything problematic, adding another person could have the opportunity to make that explode. And if there's not an opportunity for that person or you or someone else to move out after, it could be really, really tricky. So as we always say, if you're not in a good place with any existing relationship, it would probably be a bad idea to add another person to the mix. Second, ask everybody what they need to be happy and healthy in a communal space. I am, as I have mentioned, extremely particular about my living conditions and living situation. Other people may not be as particular as I am. Maybe you need free range of the kitchen. Maybe that's all you care about. Maybe you need your own bedroom or bathroom like me. Or maybe you need a quiet space to work from home. Maybe it's something more emotional that you need. There are also some other more pragmatic things to consider, like how are bills and expenses like rent and groceries going to work? Keep in mind that most married couples fight more about money than they do about sex. Not necessarily any different for polyamory. How are you going to come up with a structure that is fair for everyone? How will chores work? If you have one more person, that's one more person's mess, but it's also one more person to do chores. And not everybody likes the same chores, so it could be a great thing. Maybe that person likes chores that you don't especially like, or it could be a bad thing. Maybe nobody likes to do that one chore, like taking out the garbage or weeding the garden or putting away the dishes. How will you arrange for alone time with partners? You're probably going to want some alone time with your partner, with your kids, and with your metamour. And your metamour might want some alone time as well. How are you going to arrange for all of that? Just talk about that in advance. Come up with a plan. Now, of course, once you start implementing a plan, it never goes the way you think it's going to go. But that's what communication's for. It's best just to get any concerns and needs out at the beginning. If you have kids, ask them how they feel about your partner, your metamour, coming to live with you. Hear their concerns as well. And another thing to think about, do you have pets? Have the pets been introduced? Is one pet going to eat another pet? This was one of our concerns when I moved in with my kitty and Lustyguy and Elle's existing dog. And happily, the dog was much older by the time I moved in. And so in her younger days, she might have actually chased the cat. Nowadays, not so much. The new puppy, very much chasing the cat. Oh my God. It's like two freaking toddlers trying to kill each other all the time. And then after you do move in, as we always say, do those regular check-ins with each partner on a regular basis, every day, every week, every month, whatever works for you, to bring up what is working well and what isn't. This is a great time to thank your partner or partners for the helpful things they've done, to express gratitude and appreciation, and also to ask for what you still need or to bring up issues before they become full-blown arguments. We do our date night and check-ins once a week, and then the three of us do it together. If there's an occasion when we're all eating dinner together, then usually Lustyguy or someone will say, hey, since we're all here, let's do a check-in. And then we say, what are we thankful for? What's working really well? What isn't? And then bring up anything that we feel the need to bring up before it's big. And I guess my last bit of advice for this and for coronavirus in general that I haven't already said is I know a lot of people suffer from anxiety or depression, and even those who don't, it might be a good idea to limit your news access. Decide how often you're going to check Facebook and how often you're going to do other things. I still check it a lot because it helps me to feel connected. But it may be a good idea for some folks to say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to sign off for a day or two and just physically do things and not read the news just for a day or two. And that's okay. Questions or comments on anything we've said here? You can join the community discussion on Facebook at facebook.com/polyweekly or on Twitter at polyweekly or at cunningminx. First in our feedback today is from S from Boston.
Hi there. This is S calling from the greater Boston area. I wanted to give a word that I thought might be useful on this show. First of all, I should say I've been listening for a few years. I'm really grateful for the resources, and it has helped me and my partner navigate poly for the beginning of our adventures into it. He and I made up a word, schmeeling. And what that is as follows. If you're familiar with nonviolent communication, it's a form of communication that is all about taking responsibility for your own emotions, something that I know Minx, you and Lustyguy talk about a lot. And as part of nonviolent communication, as a person learns it, you learn the difference between a feeling and a judgment, or a feeling and a story that you're telling. In English, we often say something like, I feel like or you're attacking me, or I feel betrayed. And actually, those aren't emotions. They are stories we're telling about an experience we're having. An emotion would be something like, I feel afraid, or I feel angry. So my husband and I are very careful about our use of the word feeling, and we really try to use it only about an emotion. However, sometimes it is really useful to be able to say that you feel betrayed or you feel attacked. And so we made up the word schmeeling to allow us to have conversations where we can say, I'm going to use this colloquial English term but I'm going to acknowledge that I'm aware that what I'm saying is a story that I'm telling about what you're doing to me and not actually an emotion I'm having. And I noticed that on the show, Minx, you and Lustyguy often use feeling when I would use schmeeling, which is to say that you're using stories, the way that people think about themselves in relation to others as feelings as opposed to thought constructs and stories that they're telling. So I found that very useful in any kind of communication, and have a little dream that it will catch on as an addition to the English language or, colloquial use among those of us who are total communication nerds. Thanks, and thanks for your great work.
Thank you, S, so much for taking the time to call in and provide that feedback. And that's a great little tip. If it's important to you to distinguish between feeling and judgment, and you want to come up with a new word, I say come up with a new word if that works for you. Our next audio is from Phenomenal Metamorphosis, and it was cut off in the end, but I think we got the gist here.
Hi guys, let's try this again, so maybe you can use this on the show. By the way, I just want to let you know I really love your podcast. I really appreciate everything that you're putting out there, and you both have amazing radio voices. Your voices are sexy and wonderful to listen to, both you, Minx, and lustyguy. You can use my playa name for the show, Phenomenal Metamorphosis, or Phenom for short. My question is about poly and living together. I'm new to living with my partner of over 2 years, but we've been poly the whole time. My big concern is that I seem to get more dates and more action than him, even though I haven't really been exercising that during these first couple months that we're getting settled into our house together. I've only been on maybe one other date or slept with one other person throughout the entire 2.5, 3 months. I do have another lover in a different city that I'd like to see more, and I'd like to keep my options open and meet people. And I'm always trying to encourage a threesome with another girl. I would really like to bring more girls into our dynamic with the two of us, but I just don't know if he has a lot of experience with that or what holds him back. And this is the question. It's like, I don't know what holds him back, but what do I do to make sure that everything's okay? I check in regularly and I ask the right questions. I want to make sure I'm not making my partner feel less than or neglected, or I don't want him to think that I need to go out and have multiple dates just to feel good about myself or feel happy or excited or whatever. But I do really enjoy the variety and the excitement of new lovers or rekindling flames with old lovers. And it also makes me appreciate him more because it's a comparison, and I'm like, oh man, I'm a lucky lady back at home. But I find myself often encouraging my partner to go out and flirt with girls and invite them into our love life or ask them on a date, just do the thing that is the thing that starts the option of even getting to have sex with this person eventually. And you can sense my frustration. I feel like I'm shoving him. I feel like I'm pressuring him to try more, to date. And every time I'm doing that, I catch myself and I say, hey, never mind. Don't try to date anybody. I want you all to myself, because I don't want him to think that I don't love having him available to me most of the time either. I don't want him to meet someone else and then suddenly have no time for me.
And thanks, Phenom, for calling in. I recommend you listen to our last episode, episode 586, where we dealt with something like this. I mean, the truth is, there's actually no problem here. You do you. Your partner's doing himself. He's doing what makes him feel good. I haven't heard that he has any complaints about what's going on. It sounds like maybe you're feeling a little bit guilty, but it's up to you to deal with the guilt. Forcing him to do something that he doesn't really want to do or isn't interested in enough to try and push for himself isn't going to make you feel any better about your guilt. So accept that you feel a little bit guilty and find a way to deal with that. I think if you're doing regular check-ins where you talk about how you're happy, and if he says he's happy, that should give you a really good reason to let go of that guilt. And finally, Catherine messaged us and sent us a nice little picture on Facebook. Hi, Minx and lustyguy. We're here in Seattle celebrating my metamour's 50th birthday. My partner and I are from the Southwest, and this is a treat. It makes me happy to know we're in your town. Your podcasts mean a great deal to us, and we're both eagerly awaited and greatly appreciated. So here's a wave hello. Well, thank you, Catherine. We love getting messages like this. I always want to meet up with people when they're in Seattle. I don't always manage to do it, but I always appreciate the wave. Thank you so much. And I'm going to throw this in here in between our feedback and Happy Poly Moments section because it's a cute little story that I accidentally skipped over in the Poly the News section. And I think we all need a little bit of a laugh right now. I posted it on the Polyweekly Facebook page a little bit ago. It was from earlier in March. But did you see this? There is a perverted Illinois bald eagle threesome that is threatening the sanctity of marriage. What's next? Hawk orgies? The article starts, "By now you've probably heard about the latest relationship trend that threatens the sanctity of our marriages. Pervy bird threesomes." And that's right. A trio of Illinois bald eagles, 2 male and 1 female, huzzah! Have formed a wholly indecent 3-person couple, something liberals and other heathens call a throuple. Their nest of iniquity is near Fulton, close to the Illinois-Iowa border, and thanks to nearby cameras, presumably installed by avian pornographers, the uninhibited bird pervs have shoved their non-traditional lifestyle in the faces of wholesome people across America and around the world. Oh, and the article goes on in that wonderful tone. I highly recommend, if you need a chuckle, that you read this article. It's time for your Happy Poly Moment of the Week, brought to you by throuple polyamorists everywhere. And this week's Happy Poly Moment is about finding unexpected commonalities in your metamour. Our listener writes, "I'm a polyweekly playmate, thank you, and have been listening to the show for a few years now. I'm so deeply grateful to you for helping me navigate my introduction to polyamory. I recommend you to everyone who asks me about poly, and I explain that simply by immersing myself in your show, I've internalized language and concepts that would have taken decades to learn on my own." Boy, there's an endorsement. Thank you. My husband and I have been ethically non-monogamous from a year into our relationship. We got married knowing that it would be part of our lives together. To make a very long story short, at first I was resistant, then willing, then totally into it. My husband and I are deeply in love and very bonded. Emotionally and logistically, we are fabulous nesting partners. Yeah, like those eagles. But we both carry some deep sexual and erotic baggage from childhood and got ourselves into a mutually triggering tangle when it comes to sex with each other in recent years. We've been working to reconnect sexually, but it's a long slog. Alongside all this, my husband has a longtime play partner who comes over about once a month. She's super sweet and nerdy and awkward, and at first I felt awkward around her. But over the past few months, I've started to get to know her more, and am starting to really like her as a friend and as an older mom. My favorite recent moment was when I was sitting on our couch trying to identify an evergreen shrub during a few months when I was obsessed with tree identification. She came in the door, heard me wail, "What kind of tree is this?" and bounded over to me on the couch before even kissing my husband. She took the twig from my hand and said immediately, "Oh, that's a yew." Turns out she used to be a landscaper and knows a lot about trees. Next time she came, she lent me some of her guidebooks. The last time she was over, I even joined them for nerdy conversation between fucks. I love this. I love this. I love this story. You know, people think poly's all about the sex and the nesting and all of that. You know, sometimes it's just about the you. She finishes, "Thank you, Minx and Lustyguy, for being part of what makes it possible for so many of us to do so." Aw, you are most welcome. Thank you for writing in with that awesome happy poly moment. And thanks to all of you for listening. I'm hoping to start publishing again on a more regular basis now that I'm working from home and have a little bit more time. And a special shout out to our PW Playmates for your generous donations. We are a free resource. We've helped hundreds of thousands of people navigate their introduction to and continued success with polyamory. Those donations keep the podcast free for everyone, both inside and outside the community. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, it's not all about the sex.